Welcome to Confessions of a Wannabe It Girl. I'm your host, Marley Freygang, and I'm here to help you filter out all the bullshit and become the next It Girl. This podcast explores the reality of what it really takes to make it out there. As it turns out, it is way less Instagrammable than I thought it was going to be. I'm still very much a work in progress, but there's simply nothing else I'd rather be doing than chasing my dreams. So let's learn from my mistakes and work together to achieve our dreams with more confidence, clarity, and direction. Let's get after it. Welcome, Sydnee.
Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It's already been so fun getting to chat with you before we get on the mic.
Yeah.
So you have, just a small following of over 600K on Snapchat.
Yeah.
Which is insane. 300K on Instagram, content creator, gamer, Twitch gamer, streaming, host, Forbes 30 under 30. Formerly IGN and Daily Fix host.
Mm-hmm. It's really weird having somebody read things back. I'm not sure what to do with my face while you're talking.
I'm like, did I miss anything?
No, I've done something that I've been really intentional about my career. And this is really good for me actually to recount because we were talking, I've taken a little bit of time off and I feel like I've kind of the imposter syndrome starts creeping in. So this is actually really healthy for me.
But showcase it for us.
This is free therapy.
Love it.
So I've been really intentional with my career of just and privileged to be in a place where I can be really I just want to do things that are interesting to me. Mm-hmm. So after I left IGN, which I'm sure we'll get into the nitty gritty, but after I left IGN, I actually went and worked in game development for a little bit just because it sounded interesting and an opportunity kind of presented itself. And so I was a consultant for art direction on, I don't know what they did with it because I don't consult with them anymore, but on the behind the scenes of actually creating the video games, which was really, really cool. And then I actually did a little bit of acting this last spring, I think.
Love it.
Which just kind of came, I don't know. Hosting is performative in a different way.
They're cousins.
That's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, there's so much that is
very
in between the crafts there.
But,
so I totally get that.
Yeah, do a lot of things.
Yes, you do. You are very accomplished, which is so impressive, and I wanted to talk a little bit about how did we get here?
How'd that happen?
Yes, how did that all
Question.
happen? You were gonna go to med school?
Yeah, so I was in college I have a biology degree. I feel like I say that as often as I can. Just because I literally don't do anything with it. And so if there's one thing that I came out of those 4 treacherous years of schooling, it's that I can tell people I have a biology degree. But no, yeah, I thought I was gonna be a surgeon. I worked at Children's Hospital Orange County for a little bit, for a summer, and it was super depressing. I already had a lot of respect for doctors. I think most people do. But it completely tanked my mental health. I was not cut out for that. And then I thought I was going to get into dentistry because my mom works in dentistry. My grandfather works in dentistry. It's very in my family. And I had already taken organic chemistry, which is a prereq for med school. And it was so hard. Honestly, to this day might be one of the hardest things I've ever done, was trying to get a good grade in organic chemistry. And so I had already taken OChem, and OChem was also prereq for dentistry. And so I thought, oh, cool, that I'm not wasting, what is that called? Sunken cost fallacy?
Yeah, whatever.
But so during all of that, I was streaming on Twitch. I had started streaming because I've always played video games, but very much just my dad plays video games. It was something I did with my dad and my brother and my friends growing up. And in college, I went to something called MLG Anaheim, which is...
I have no idea what that is.
Okay, so it's an esports event. I don't know if I don't think they definitely don't still do it because MLG doesn't exist. But, it doesn't matter. Went to MLG Anaheim, and it's this big thing. So it's convention center, and there's one area, and there's a big screen, and there's teams playing against each other playing Call of Duty. And then next to it, there's another big screen, and there's people playing against each other in Super Smash Brothers Melee. So it's kind of a
convention.
It's a competitive convention. We'll call it that.
And can anyone play, or do you have to be at a certain level to go play?
I would say they're definitely professionals. Okay, but I don't know. Some different games might have opens where anyone could join, and then you would climb the ranks to play against people who are ranked in the scene. Right. But I went to go watch Call of Duty, and there is, I don't know if I've ever talked about this on podcast. It's kind of, I don't know if embarrassing is the right word, but I'm friends with him now, and I don't think he knows that that he influenced me like this.
Do you tell that's definitely the definition of confessions of a wannabe it girl?
Yes.
So yes.
It's definitely a confession. But so it's this guy named Nadeshot, Matt. And I think you say his, I don't even know how to say his last name, Haig, I think. But so Matt was playing on the team that I was rooting for, and he also did vlogging. And he was very good at being a professional player and also kind of doing videos that like were more than
creative content creator vibe as well.
Yeah. And so I started watching his videos, and I just saw like what a big influence he was having on people. And he was like, not like fake positive, but he wasn't super negative. It was really relatable and obviously inspiring. And so I idiotically was like, I'm going to become a streamer. I'm going to be a Twitch streamer. And I say idiotically because I had limited tech knowledge, and it can get very technical.
Yeah.
Like you have to kind of build a PC. At least at that point, you kind of had to build a PC in order to get something that was more like be able to stream with. Now I think you can get pre-builds and whatever. But at that point, I didn't even know, what a pre-build was versus going and getting like a Dell PC.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know the difference.
So I just like went to Best Buy and thought, oh, I'll just get a Dell PC, whatever, it'll do what I need to. And the person I was talking to didn't even know what I was trying to do.
Great.
So it was just blind leading the blind. Long story short, ended up kind of getting something that like kind of did the job. And while I was in college, I was streaming just for fun because I thought, why not? I'm playing on Twitch. Okay. Yeah. I'm playing video games. Like I'm going to live stream me playing it. Fun. And then I realized my junior year, I realized I didn't want to go into dentistry. I took something called the DAT, which is kind of like the SAT or like the MCAT, but to get into dental school.
Okay.
I studied, like I devoted my life to this. I studied like 8 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 months. And I told myself, and like the practice tests were going horrible. So I told myself if I didn't get above a certain grade, like score on it, then I was going to find a different route because I wanted to stay in California. I was dating a guy at the time, and it was like, it would just be easiest if I did this in California. And clearly I didn't want to do it enough. I wasn't passionate enough that I was going to let it take me somewhere else.
Totally.
And so I got above the score, and then I just sat in my car and cried.
Oh no, because you really didn't want to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. I wanted a good excuse. I was like, oh, I can't do it. So that's why I'm not doing it.
Right.
And that is what made me realize shouldn't do that. So I kind of just was scrambling to figure out what other marketable skills I have. And the only thing that I really did outside of school. So I did school, and then I was like a USC. I went to USC. USC has something called Spirit Leaders, which is kind of like sideline cheer. Like it's not as like insane stunts as like a competitive cheer squad, but like I did that, and then I streamed, and I wasn't going to become a professional cheerleader. So I guess I'm going to like go down the content route. So I ended up going to Red Bull had an event at USC for this game Destiny, which actually was the game that I was a Destiny streamer for the first like couple years that I streamed. And they ran this tournament. My team ended up winning the tournament, and the prize was that you got to compete in the grand finals at Red Bull HQ, which is in Santa Monica. Cool. So went there, and when I was there, when I tell you I was schmoozing the shit out of people, like I was there with one goal, and it was to get a job out of this fucking tournament.
I love that. What okay, people love the schmooze, people love the network. Like what were you legitimately saying to these people?
That's a really good question. So it's hard to talk about networking without coming off as like a skis ball.
Yeah. Or like you're just cloud chasing or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think so. I had a really deep reverence for Red Bull. The reason I wanted to work for Red Bull was I was a really big wakeboarder when I was in high school. Yeah. And I got really into watching like action sport films. And so while I wasn't the best wakeboarder, wasn't the best snowboarder, Red Bull was somebody in the scene who in gaming and esports as well. Is
there anything Red Bull's not in that's extreme?
Right. No, totally. Well, it's funny because I definitely like I drank the Red Bull Kool-Aid before I started working there. Yeah. And then
great marketing plan.
Yeah. And then once I worked there, it just got even worse. And I haven't worked there in years, and I still like sing the praises of this brand. So they're clearly doing something right. But I liked that they take these grassroots things and like they do a really good job of like injecting. I mean, they say like Red Bull gives you wings, and they do a good job of kind of like elevating the space without taking over it or doing like being sleazy about it.
I totally agree with that.
And so I think having like a very deep conviction of the brand helped a lot, because it wasn't like, oh, I'm just trying to get a job, or
I'm just shooting my shot to shoot it.
Yeah. Or even like, oh, I want to work here because it's high profile. Like I had a really deep conviction of like, I love what this brand is doing and I believe in it and I'm excited to be here. And the fact that you're doing this with Destiny, a game that I love.
What is
I think that came
game
through.
of Destiny for those who don't know?
Yeah,
like,
so
what does
Destiny,
it look like?
I feel like if you're listening to this and you don't know very much about video games, you probably though have heard of a game called Halo. Have you heard
of course.
Halo?
And Call of Duty. Those are kind of the big, because that's what my boyfriend plays.
Yeah.
And that's like
those are kind of the big ones.
Knowledge.
Yeah, perfect. Well, so the people who made the original Halo, because the developers that made Halo has changed since the game originally came out, but Bungie is who made like Halo like 1, 2, 3, I think 4. I don't remember.
Copy that.
But whatever. And Bungie made Destiny. That was their next game.
So similar style?
Like same but different.
Cool.
You shoot things. You shoot aliens.
Stunning. I
so
get
in that way,
we can
similar.
all understand that one.
You're shooting aliens. You're in
Love
space.
it.
And it's a great game. But I just kind of talked to people about what they were doing. I expressed my gratitude for being there. I was excited that they were doing the tournament in general. I expressed how much I enjoyed like the brand, and I talked about what they were doing with wakeboarding and snowboarding, and just that's kind of how I talk to people. It wasn't like I was asking like for a job or being like, do you need an intern? But you weren't
pushing yourself. You were telling them how much you liked them.
Yes,
yeah, it's a big distinction, I think.
And I think that's but it was also, I think, coming from a really genuine place, because I'm sure you've had conversations. I mean, we live in LA.
I know
it has a reputation. Like you've had conversations where people are like, wow, you're so great.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da. You can sniff out when somebody's not being real with you. And so I'm sure they probably could sense that I was very much like obsessed with this brand, but not in like a creepy way. I think that's the other distinction, is there's a happy space to be in where you don't want to be like groveling. Right?
Totally.
And so I think towards the end of the day, I straight up asked, I was like, this has been an incredible experience. Like, is there anything that I could do to like, are you guys running more tournaments? Can I PA? Can I be involved in any capacity? Yeah. Or like, please let me know if there's anything that I can do. And I don't think at that point they had anything for me, but also I asked, you kind of identify who's in charge, and I asked the guy who was in charge, and Good job. I really schmoozed him. Yes, I think genuine interest goes a long way. And I think also if I didn't already have that knowledge, but of the brand going into it, if you're going to like a networking event, I don't know, do some research. Just like do some general research. Yeah. Come on, we've all stocked exes. Like we know how to do it.
You have the skill set.
Exactly. You know how to do it. So like just apply it to work.
Love it.
But so yeah, I got his email, and then I got a couple other people's emails, and then I just asked everybody to coffee.
Love it.
And so 2 of the women that I like exchanged information with, we went to coffee. One of them tried to bring me on as an intern. They didn't have space. Another one brought me on as a consultant. The main guy, I can't remember his name now. It starts with a B. He brought me on as a consultant. And so I was helping them with Red Bull and Destiny's partnership. And that was kind of through my graduation. There were a few months where I wasn't working with them, and I was definitely very stressed about what am I going to do after graduation.
And what was going on with your Twitch streaming at this time? And
I was just streaming. I mean,
were you building up a following?
Kind of. The thing
sort
is,
of, yeah.
I think you get so jaded working, not to be like, my friends are so cool, but my friends are really cool. And a lot of my friends are creators. And like, I think when you hang out with a bunch of creators, it's easy to get so jaded by numbers.
Yes.
But at the time, it felt like a lot of people. I had like, I think 30 to 75 people watching me.
But
which felt, you go from 0 to 75. It's a really good feeling. So that was kind of where I was sitting, which was really cool. I was excited about it. And I used that to basically get a job at Red Bull full time afterwards in a different department.
Cool.
And so there I was in the syndication department and did YouTube strategy for action sports. And then I kind of weaseled my way into esports. And then on the esports side, I started doing more of like creative producing and production.
Love.
And then from there, when I was at Red Bull, somebody like cold reached out to me on LinkedIn about working at BuzzFeed. And this was like BuzzFeed heyday. I know BuzzFeed is kind of
different now, but like I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, this
was
was
like 2019,
2017,
oh, yeah.
2018.
Yep.
So this is like Try Guys are there, Quinta's there, like BuzzFeed video, all of that. BuzzFeed is the internet at this point. It's when they like exploded the watermelon on, I think it was Facebook Live with rubber bands. Like they were just doing a bunch of things. And so they reached out to me, and they actually reached out for a weekend position. And I remember I almost didn't even entertain it because I was like, I don't want to work on the weekend. It would have been, I think, a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday job, I think. And then you're off Tuesday, Wednesday, Tuesday and Wednesday.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was shifted because they needed somebody to do coverage on the weekend that had like a strategy background. And I remember I took the interview just because I think it's a good exercise, even if you're thinking you're going to say no, because what's the worst that can happen? You're getting better at interviews, which is a hard skill. Yeah. Or you find out that you actually like the job and then you take it. So
not much to lose there.
Exactly. Yeah. So I took the interview, and I was kind of, I don't know if this is good advice or not, but I was pretty transparent that I was not overly interested about working the weekend. No, I think that's like really good advice, because I think there's something really important about careers and like moving up, and like when you give off needy energy, like you need this job. Yeah. No one's going to want to hire you. Well, and I think that's a good point, is like, I, in college, really struggled with being upfront about what I was, like, what my plans were. I wasn't trying to be, like, sneaky, but maybe maybe I could have come off that way, because I was definitely keeping my cards really close to my chest. Whereas once I got into the workforce, I was very transparent with people. Like, my boss at Red Bull, while I was there, I told him his name was Paul, and I was like, I think I want to do on-camera work. Like, I will do everything in my power to continue to be great at my job. And I said this once I had proven that, like, I was really good at my job. Right. Like, I asked him, is there anything you can do to help me? Are there any internal opportunities that you can think of that I can kind of do it on the side? Like, how can we work together to do this? And while he told me, I can't help you. I don't know how to help you. But if you get your work done, you can do whatever you want. Cool. So I was like, okay. And so I ended up, there was an internal newsletter at Red Bull, it was a video newsletter. And I talked to the lady that ran it, and she was like, cool, yeah, come PA, like come shadow me. And then they eventually let me do like a segment, and I realized I really liked it. It was horrible. I did a horrible job, but I did it.
You did it.
Which is the important part. And so then had the BuzzFeed interview, was pretty transparent about not wanting to work the weekend, but said I was open to it if there was a path to working like a more traditional schedule. Yeah. And
on camera?
Well, so I didn't, that's something that I was not overly transparent about. But the reason I wanted to go to BuzzFeed was I found out, and I asked this during my interview, was how do you guys cast videos? And I found out that all of the people that you see in videos work at BuzzFeed. Or not all, we'll say 90%. Sure. They send out an email blast to everyone in the company that's like, I'm doing a video on, different cat food. Yeah. Like, do you have a cat that you'd want to bring into the office? Like, email me back. We're shooting on Tuesday.
It's kind of a fun, very culture,
super fun. Yeah. Very, very fun.
Company culture's probably lit there.
Yeah. But so I found out about that, and I was like, oh, I could be in videos if I worked here. Where Red Bull has a really strict policy, or again, when I worked there, that if you were an employee, you couldn't appear on like anything external. Talent. Yeah. So I ended up taking the BuzzFeed job. I did YouTube strategy for them for, I was there for about a year, maybe like a little bit less, because while I was at BuzzFeed, I got really plugged into, they brought me on because they wanted me to expand their gaming strategy there. And so I was doing that, and then I was doing just viral videos, like viral hits. And I would always say yes anytime somebody asked me to be in a video. Anytime I became good friends with the producers there, and anytime somebody needed me to like run sound or operate a camera, I always said yes.
Huh, familiar.
Right? Because it's like, how else are you going to learn? And yeah, I always said yes. And they actually asked me to be in a video where I trained with WWE for a week.
Oh my God.
In Florida.
What?
Yes. It was my first week. But they knew that the BuzzFeed office was on Sunset at that point. Yeah. And it was down the street from an Equinox, and everybody just knew, I guess, that I would always I'd go to the gym before work and then walk to work. But I always had my gym bag and looked kind of sweaty or whatever. So they were like, this bitch works out. Great. And so that's why they asked me, though, was because you had to be in pretty good shape because you were going to get the shit kicked out of you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I said yes.
Welcome to the new job. You're going to get the shit kicked out of you.
Exactly. But then I think very quickly established a reputation at the company that I was down for anything.
Yeah.
And like, if you had a video that was hard to cast or you needed something more athletic, like I was one of maybe like 5 people at the company that'd be super down to kind of throw my body around.
Yeah.
So I started doing that. I was in regular videos maybe like once or twice a week. And then Jeff Keighley, who runs something called the Game Awards. And in the gaming space, think of like, it's the Oscars for video games.
Sure. Yeah.
So his team reached out to me randomly, just like cold emailed me.
Wow.
And asked if they said they needed a backstage host, and just asked if I'd be interested in like sending them some footage or whatever to see if I'd be a good fit.
So because obviously you already knew about the gaming world too.
Yeah, and this whole time I'm streaming.
Right. And is that following how are you managing doing both
I had
of these?
no life.
Okay, yeah.
And that's actually an interesting thing that I'm sure we'll get to, because I'm in this place now where I went from one extreme to another.
Okay.
And I'm kind of trying to understand the balance.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah, because like when I tell you I had no social life, I kept a very tight group of friends that I kind of never saw. My relationship in college was long distance, so it kind of worked out perfectly because like I didn't have to maintain it really outside of like phone calls. I mean, he ended up cheating on me like a few times, so like
so
that worked out great. But jokes on him.
Yeah, no fun.
But, I was I was streaming, I was doing YouTube, and then I had my full-time job. And when I worked at BuzzFeed, I did not live close.
Yeah.
So it was like I had to leave, I think, at 5 a.m. to get to the gym so that I could work out, do my job, and then it took like an hour and a half to 2 hours to get home. So then I'd get home at 8, and then I'd start streaming, and then I'd work on a YouTube video, and then I'd have to go to bed and start again.
Oy.
So I was very much grinding. It's hard for me to say like, don't do that, because I know that
there's a season in everyone's life where you have to do it.
Yeah. That work ethic is definitely what got me in this place where like, it's a Thursday afternoon. I'm kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, let's get coffee.
Right.
So I don't know. It's hard.
I totally hear you, because I do say, I've had an interest. I go through I should be more balanced. I'm unbalanced. I'm balanced. I don't want balance. I go through like all those stages, but I do agree there's something about that time, you know, when you're settling into like, do you want to do this? And at the same time, this really is what you want to do, that you have to do it.
You have to grind. I wish that there was another way.
It's not healthy. It should not be maintained forever. Like, you should not be living that way. It's not sustainable, but like I do think those hours need to be spent sometimes.
Yeah, well, I think that like something that I've always my Snapchat is like my biggest platform, and I do a lot of Q&A and whatever on it. And something that I've said a lot is, and you touched on, is seasons.
Yeah.
And I think you just need to be really clear with yourself. Like, I'm going to do this for a month. I'm going to check in with myself at the end of this month and see like, 1, is this working towards my goals? 2, am I doing okay health-wise?
Yeah. Because
I ended up developing an illness from like driving myself into the ground for 5 years.
Sure.
So like, are you doing okay health-wise? Mentally, how am I doing? And kind of check in with yourself to see if you can keep going, and maybe set like I'm doing this for a year.
Right.
And then after that, like, I have to take at least a month to kind of take care of myself, because you can get sucked in so easy.
Yeah. I love the limit or the deadlines or the, dates until you even I'm going to do this really hard for 1 month is good for me.
Yeah. Just check in with yourself.
Yeah.
And if you want to keep doing it, cool. But I think just making sure that doesn't become your life, because I know people who have been grinding for years and they are very successful, but they also like are on this teeter-totter of they're grinding and then they have to take a week off because they're like,
I can't,
literally dying.
Yeah.
And then they come back and they're like at 80% and they just they're not very happy. Like, it's so easy to get sucked into it. I digress. All I had to say was at BuzzFeed, they asked me to do the hosting thing. And then I ended up liking hosting more than doing video strategy.
Sure.
And the nice thing is, so IGN is a like video game and entertainment media company.
Mm-hmm.
And a bunch of the executives were at the Game Awards, and they happened to have an open position. And so I applied, and one thing led to the next, and I got the job. They gave me their like flagship show, which is the Daily Fix. It's like a daily gaming news show. And it was
on Snapchat too?
Yeah. So I launched it on Snapchat. Before, it was just on their website and on YouTube. But then we launched it on Snapchat, me and like a little team. And then I ended up like writing and producing and hosting it for like a couple years.
And then how did you decide to leave that?
Oh my gosh, that was gnarly. I think it was like
made it, but like also it's like
it was a
spring on your own too.
An interesting thing working at IGN, and I'm sure I'd love to talk about like the sexualization of working in a male-dominated industry.
Yes, because gaming's got a lot of them.
Yeah, because that was definitely, I guess, I don't know if part of it, but I say this, I love the people that I worked with at IGN. I still talk to my manager, like they're some of my closest friends.
Like it is a huge company in the gaming world, right? It is.
It's the biggest media company. It is the biggest media company in gaming, and I think that has less weight now because people follow creators, but
yeah, like I guess TikTok kind of.
I feel like YouTube before the like creator economy really blew up and people want to see like how, I don't know, like if Valkyrie likes this thing or like Courage JD likes this thing. There was more of an emphasis on a reviewer, somebody puts out a video game review, et cetera, et cetera. So I worked there, and the expectation, I was very much kind of like the token woman, which was tough, because I think that like from my position, it felt like there were expectations that were kind of like it wasn't sustainable.
Sure.
There was a show that I had in San Francisco because they had an LA office in San Francisco, and the Daily Fix was something we were writing and shooting it every day before noon. We would have 2 videos shot and like a full script, 2 full scripts written. And granted, I had help writing. My friend Nick would write with me. But that's a big ask, right?
Yeah,
and then
a quick turnaround too.
I would have to take a flight up to San Francisco. The first flight of the morning, I think it was like a 5:30. I'd have to take that up to San Francisco so that I could be there early enough that I could have eyes on the script, shoot the show, and then shoot the other show that I was in there for up in San Francisco for. And then I'd have to take the last flight out so that I could come home, but I'd have to be back in the office the next morning because I had to shoot the daily news show. So
you're joking.
It was just, and that would happen maybe like once or twice a month. So it wasn't every day, but it was like once or twice a month you'd be doing that. And then there's like the convention season that's just all hands on. It's so fun, but it's a lot of work. And so it just was getting to this point.
And that includes like Comic-Con,
E3, Gamescom, which is in Cologne, Germany.
Oh boy.
Like it was just
not close.
Like never ending. And it was really fun. I feel really lucky to have those experiences. But it was like, I was starting to make influencer money and I was making like more than what I was making in like a month at IGN. I'd make with like one brand deal. And is that saying that the brand deals I was making were really big, or is it saying I wasn't making very much at IGN? I don't know.
It's all a lot of perspective there. Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, I love this, but I'm killing myself. Like, and then I started to develop this autoimmune issue. And so everything kind of just came to a head, and we were renegotiating my contract with IGN. I had representation at that point, and my agent was renegotiating this contract, and they changed something in the contract when they sent it over to me. And it had been like 2 or 3 months of negotiating, and I kind of had enough. Like the asks that they were asking for just felt really like, it made me feel like I wasn't very valued. And so while it sucks and maybe it was a miscommunication, I think it was necessary because I don't know that I would have left on my own. But I was like, I can't sign this. And so we kind of just made the call. And at that point I was married. And so I actually think that had a safety net, because, it's like, okay, I'm attached to this person. If I totally fail, like at least somebody has a job. So I don't know where my head would have been if I wasn't in that position. I'm not married anymore, but like clearly I'm still freelance and I'm fine. But
you touched on a little bit about how the gaming industry is very male dominant. And maybe just because of the nature of like who games at the very beginning are marketed to, and it does seem to attract more men. But would you consider it like a sexist or biased place?
It's hard to make that judgment. I think the other interesting thing, because it's like, I don't know if self-fulfilling is the right word, but if you look at the data, like it's almost a 50-50 split on
I love to hear that.
Who plays video games.
Love that.
Which is like, I think really important.
Yes.
But this isn't part of that same data set, but if you asked people, if you were a gamer, I bet you the women that do play video games, very few people would say yes.
Just because you think it's not mainstream for women
I think that I think if you play mobile games, you're a gamer. Like if you play Candy Crush, you're a gamer. Like I think that there's been this discourse of like gatekeeping that you have to like play Call of Duty or Madden or like you have to play, it only counts if you play these games.
Totally.
And I think that's changed in the last couple of years, which I think is great because, you know, people are playing Animal Crossing. Like you're a gamer.
Totally. I used to play Nintendo Pets. Yeah. Like whatnot.
You're a gamer.
Exactly.
You know, like anybody can be a gamer. So I'll say that. That said, I think that like the people who at that point were most vocal in this space were men. Mm-hmm. And like I definitely had my fair share of kind of not fun situations. I had a stalker who was a guy. And I had to go to court. It was horrible. It was like the most scared I've ever, he came to my house 3 times. Like it was the most scared I've ever been in my life. Like it was horrible.
And, and like, do you think that had to do with the fact that you were gaming or just the fact that you were putting yourself out on the internet? Like as so many people do.
Yeah. I don't know. It was something where I think that also though people, I mean, parasocial relationships, I think was maybe the deep underlying thing of that. But I had like this whole thread on 4chan about like the clothes that I wear and that like they
don't do that to the males, do they?
Yeah, and how like they couldn't believe that like I'm only getting ahead because, you know, and it's tough because I would love to say I'm like, I don't care what the comments say, and like I don't, but it wears on you.
Okay, thank you for saying that because I feel like so many people who are, you know, putting themselves on the internet, they say, I don't read my comments, whatever. And we had a girl on who's a social media manager, and she was literally saying, like, I don't believe that for a second. Because, like, you cannot care, but you're going to read them. It's going to live somewhere.
Yeah, well, even, like, it's like you're getting tagged in things or, like, this is an embarrassing story, confessions.
Love it.
So my boyfriend is a content creator. And we were not public about dating, but he works in the video game space as well or makes videos in gaming. And so we had like a little bit of an audience crossover. And where I would maybe like post a story at this thing and he'd post a story at the thing too.
Right, you're not together, but
people started to put it together.
Yeah.
And I thought it was like so fun because it was this thing that we like were keeping for ourselves.
We
but
are
like
all
people were
actually
kind
FBI agents for
right?
the internet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People were kind of like figuring it out. And so I got in this habit of kind of reading my comments because I wanted to see if anybody like was figuring it out.
Yeah.
And when I tell you my mental health tanked, it was such a bad habit that I have been working really hard to stop. But so yes, all that to say, very human to read the comments.
Yes.
And somebody like brought it to my attention. And I think they meant it like in a nice way. They tagged me on Twitter and were like, I don't know if you see that this is happening, but like, can you do something about this? Linking to the 4chan, like, and it was like a 20 page thing of people going back and forth about what the clothes that I'm wearing to my work.
Like saying what?
Just that I'm like, that I'm asking for it, that I'm a slut, that like it doesn't make sense, like that IGN is telling me to wear these sexual clothes. And like the things that they were talking about is like, I remember there was one day and the IGN, the Daily Fix did insane numbers on that day. And we couldn't figure out why, because it wasn't like a big
that interesting
news day. Yeah, it wasn't something that you
slow
would
news
think.
Day. Yeah,
exactly. And I was wearing this silk button-down shirt, and I had just like seen, I don't think TikTok was really a thing at that point, so maybe it was like a YouTube video or whatever, where somebody like unbuttoned it and then kind of wore it to the side, so like your shoulder was showing,
hanging off. Yeah,
and
cute.
Like,
sounds trendy.
Yeah, and it was like kind of like a boat neck situation. Yeah. And so I did that, and it was cute. And like, yeah, I do look back at some of the things that I was wearing at that point, and I'm like, Sid, like, why is your, like, that's not very professional of you.
But like at the same time, like who,
sure, whatever. Nobody ever talked to me on the IGN side of it.
On some level, I'm glad they kind of didn't.
Right? No, totally. Yeah. They just let me like have my style because I love fashion. And so they let me have my personal fashion.
That's
or my
a huge part
style.
of who you are online too.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so anyways, that day that I was wearing the button-down shirt, all the comments were talking about how like it looked like I had just like had sex and gotten out of bed and like it was really sexy or whatever.
The audacity of people.
But the thing was, it wasn't just one person. It was like there were tons of comments talking about how, because I had chosen to wear a button-down shirt that I thought was like fun and cute to like wear to the side. And then there was another day where it was like I was wearing like a cut like this, and I think the thumbnail that we thought of was like I was like laying like this, like I was like laying in grass and like thinking of something.
Right.
And they liked that because it was like, if I laid like that and like they would like nut on me or whatever that, like, it was insane. Like, I feel myself getting hot thinking about it, because not like hot, like,
no,
I
know
hot,
what you
like
mean.
I can't, like, mad.
Who would say this?
And but that was my life for like 3 years, was I would just kind of exist, and then I'd have people making
and
assumptions about.
I feel like because we excuse the gaming industry as being a male thing, even though what you're saying is like who plays is actually 50-50. I think something like makes people think that's okay.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, well, this is like, a guy dominant space. So we're all just going to continue to do that. Like
kind of that like locker room.
Right. Or it's just like, group. It's like, oh, and like probably the one other person who thought that saw that other one comment. He's like, well, this person thinks
it's okay.
I'll write it too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, being somebody putting yourself out on the internet, again, I get that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And there's tons of things I love about my job. This is something I don't love.
Yeah.
Just like anyone who has any job, there's good and bad. But definitely it's kind of been a mind fuck, because I mean, something we were talking about before we started rolling is like, I don't really wear bras.
Mm-hmm.
Just never, my boobs are small enough that I have never really needed to wear one unless I'm working out.
Probably better for your health anyways.
Yeah. And so it's like, I just don't really wear bras unless in the work situation, unless like you could see my nipples, I'd like put pasties on.
Sure. Beautiful.
Cool.
Amazing.
Try to be professional. And that's if you're not,
air quotes.
That was big air quotes. But I like, people started doing this whole thing that like I do it on purpose to get views, and like, this is like, wow, look at Sydnee, like she knows what she's doing.
Right.
And it just like eats away at you. Again, I have the agency to start wearing a bra, but then is that just as quote bad as, wearing a push-up bra so that you can see my boobs better? Like basically being dictated by the comments. Like it created a very confused, I still get confused.
Right. Because then I feel like, we all know on some level, unfortunately and fortunately, that, sex sells. And so it's like, then it's like, do you lean into it or do you not lean into it? And it's like, if you don't, you're doomed. And if you do, you're doomed.
It's confused. I don't know the right way to deal with it. And I feel like it sounds like I'm bitching a lot. I think I'm more like commiserating, like, someone please tell me what to do with this.
It's confusing because it's just as, I mean, you could take it with like having a clickbaity caption or, bar on TikTok does just the same thing as being sexy. It gets more views, it gets more attention.
Well, it started making me really like overthink things, I guess, because I would post, like I stick my tongue out a lot.
Me too, actually.
Like it's cute. I've always done it. Like
elongates my face.
Whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. People have something to say about that. And like, it's like pornographic. And then you start to think, then you start to think like, should I not stick my tongue out anymore? Yeah. And so that being said, that was definitely a very prevalent conversation topic with me hosting. There's, a lot of people who watch my hosting because like I'm good at what I do and like I write good scripts, which is great. Unfortunately, I feel like the ones that are very vocal are maybe ones that you wouldn't want to be very vocal.
I think that's how it always is.
Yeah. But then from the industry side too, I've definitely experienced my fair share of like when I was working maybe in the more traditional workforce and not freelance, it was like, there was one point where I was the only person in the room who streamed on Twitch. I had been streaming at that point for like 5 years. And they were asking a question about Twitch. And I said my like expertise. And it was in a room full of men and nobody listened to me.
Oh, because you're a girl, you can't game, you can't be on Twitch. There's no way.
It was just, it wasn't even that. I feel like so much of it is subconscious. Because the other interesting thing is like, all the men I've worked with have been awesome people. Like I hang out with a lot of them still. Totally. And like those were the same people that were in the room. And I think just it's like this, not to give them a pass necessarily, but it's something that isn't as malicious as maybe is shown in media where it's people being like, sit down, you're a girl. Right. But it is something where it's like nobody would accept what I said as true until another guy in the room was like, oh, I think Sid has a point. And then it was like, oh, okay. And that would happen a lot with like the Daily Fix. I would choose stories or I would suggest something. And like, even though it was my show that I worked on every day, I understood the audience. I was writing it for years. If I suggested something, oftentimes I would have to have one of my male producers kind of be like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I think Sid, like good pick Sid. Or they'd have to kind of validate me in some capacity. for us to move on. Otherwise, it kind of would be a conversation.
Yeah, and I think that's like that is not just a gaming industry thing. It just always takes like an extra validation, and like I think you're right. It's not as it just happens.
Yeah, so sometimes unfortunately like that does happen.
Sure.
In my head, I'm like, I would love for that to happen because I'm like, I like conflict enough that I would, then it feels like I could say something.
Right.
But when it's happening kind of underneath, and then you start to kind of think, am I crazy?
Like, am I right?
Am I reading into this?
Right.
Like maybe it was just a bad idea. I don't know. And you start to kind of really like, the number of therapy sessions I've had on this is just astronomical.
Well, and that brings me to another question. Like you have these massive followings in what we've deemed, even though, as you said, it's not, male industry. Do you know what your followers
are? It's mostly men.
Yeah.
Okay. I would kill. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, whoa, this bitch seems rad.
Yeah, go follow her.
Come hang out. No, it's mostly men. Yeah. And that's been like a really interesting thing as well. Cause some of them are like really awesome and have been following me for years and are very supportive. But then so my boyfriend and I, we're public now, whatever. But we're posting about each other. And like, I've definitely had people be like, I follow you for your life, not for like you and your boyfriend. It's like, okay, well, he's part of my life now. So like, I'm not really sure what to tell you. So there is like where I'm sure that
where you're going.
Female fans or people with a more like female audience get people who have opinions on their lives. That's part of putting your life on the internet. But it's this weird, it feels almost like territorial. Like you have a bunch of, this sounds more pleasant than it even necessarily is, but sometimes it feels like you have a bunch of like older brothers.
No, that's
who,
nice.
Have a lot of things to say.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know you.
Right. In reality, you don't actually know
it's
you.
Like, thank you for watching my content and for supporting me because that's part of why I can do what I do. And I don't know you.
But I don't know you. There was another girl who was on the podcast and she told me the most followers she had ever lost was the day she got engaged.
Yeah.
And I was like, ooh. Like that's
I have lost followers since Brandon and I have been like more public about my relationship, or our relationship. I definitely, when I was married, like that was, my follower count took a huge hit. It's just one of those things.
Breaks my heart though.
Yeah. I don't know. It's tough. 'Cause on one hand, it's like, okay, bye.
Yeah, but you don't want to follow me for me. Okay, you should leave.
Sure,
I agree with that.
Right? On the other hand, though, I think that like a narrative that I've been served by, whether it's just like rude people who I know in person or it's like haters on the internet, which like haters are going to exist no matter what. And again, I can't caveat this enough. I get that like this is such a champagne problem. Right?
Totally. Yes. We're talking about the privilege of the privilege here.
Such a champagne problem. But it's like people telling you, oh, they're only following you because you're hot. The number of times I get that, and it's like, do you have any idea how hard I have worked to put myself into this position? Or like, I did YouTube strategy for some of the biggest brands at that time. Like, I'm a smart person.
Right. This is what I do.
You just want to scream it from the rooftop sometimes when people just put you in this little box of like, oh, you're just like a hot gamer girl.
Right.
And the number of, I know so many women in the space who are brilliant and they get the same treatment too. Everyone is just, it's like you get invalidated so quickly because you are like a girl. Period. That's
it. It's sexualized. And just being a girl is sexy or whatnot.
Yeah. And so that's another interesting thing though, because it's like, I like being sexy. Sure. I like wearing tight clothing. I like wearing crop tops.
Fashion is a huge part of who you are too on the internet as well.
And a lot of things that fashion is inherently can be sexy.
Sure. And we have no problem with that.
Yeah. And so it's this weird thing too, where I think I'm in a space right now where I'm trying to understand like, one, how much do I want to share of myself on the internet? Two, what is the balance of, I guess, losing followers, losing financially, what kind of hit is that? And like trying to post content that I want to post that maybe is leaning more into my my interests that are maybe more female. Yeah. Like female audience driven. Right. You know, if I'm posting about like 5 different ways I like styling these jeans, not sure how applicable that is to like my male audience.
Yeah. But it's at the end of the day, like you said, you have built yourself with all these other skills. If you want to post the jean video, right?
Yeah, but it's a weird game. Like, being completely honest, it's a weird mental game, right? Like, I have been bleeding followers, and haven't been posting about video games. And like, I don't blame them. Like, I unfollow people who
don't do that thing.
Exactly. Like, it's part of it.
This stat is from when I was in college, so this is not like, it used to be like about 1 million things a day of media you ingest. That was 2018.
That is a staggering number.
Yeah, 1 million. So now it's probably like, with how many data you see just from scrolling on, the fact that we added in more apps since then is you're just so inundated.
Yeah,
so like,
it
is hard. Yeah,
but I think it is like hard not to place value. Like, again, being completely honest, like, I pride myself as somebody who, I'm like, whatever, like, I'm just lucky to be here.
Right. Cool. So let's talk about that, the balance.
Yeah.
You're in this season of dealing with the balance of working hard in your career and your personal life, and you've put in these hours in this past. How are you handling it all? What does that look like?
I'm figuring that out. I think that it's been this weird thing where the beginning of my career was so, like, very unbalanced.
It seems like it was just like, go.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It was like, fucking go.
Yeah.
And I had a blast doing it, and I drove myself into the ground. It was not healthy. I did not have any friends that I saw ever. Like, I had some people I would maybe text every once in a while. I'm really close to my family, so I had that at least, and they were understanding when they, like, wouldn't see me. But, like, I was so not balanced. I took care of my body because I was on camera. That was a very motivating factor to work out. But it was because I only did things that felt like they served my career. And then I went kind of all the way to the other side, where I ended up taking about a year off from my own content. I'd post sporadically, but like, I was really only doing incoming hosting work while I was managing whatever was going on with my health, which ended up being a stress. Like, it was all stress.
Oh, okay.
I saw 15 different doctors.
Oh boy, that's a whole nother podcast too.
Yeah. And it was to come down to, it was all stress. And then, you know, I was like managing my divorce, which is just as, it was like a pretty amicable divorce too, but it was just as like heavy and had so much
hard.
Like, what is it? It just takes a lot of space.
Yeah, it just takes up.
So then I'm moving into the season where now that stuff's all behind me. Great. And I'm trying to understand, like, I have friends now. I'm social. I have a ton of hobbies, and I do things for fun. But now what's the balance of, I guess, pushing yourself when you don't want to do things, because I think it's important to do things that make you uncomfortable, and also letting yourself rest. Like, on a day where you wake up and you don't want to do anything, how do you determine if it's a day where it's like, oh, you know, it's a Saturday, you wake up and you have this huge list of chores that you need to do, or you could get ahead on a project. How do you determine if it's a day when you're going to say, well, suck it up and go work on that project, like, it'll be good for you, or suck it up and go do all these chores, you'll love it when the house is clean. And how do you determine when it's a day when it's like, oh no, my body's saying that it needs rest, like, I'm just going to go for like a long walk, and then I'm going to sit on the couch and like watch my favorite movie. I don't have the answer to that. And so I think that's like currently what I'm working on, is kind of trying to understand how that decision is made. Yeah, I call myself an type A person with a B personality, and I kind of like let myself do that, but it's hard because there's even days where I'm like this literally happened yesterday. I was like, I'm so don't want to do anything. Like, I don't want to work at all. I don't want to do anything at all. I want to just rest. But like, that was not an option. Like, it was just, that's not an option. And you had to do it. And like, you kind of, when you can ebb and flow with it, I think you should. And when you can't, you just be like, hey, this is momentary. It's champagne problem. Most of my friends are creators, so they also have these kind of like random schedules. Right. You live in the circle of the same life. And then my boyfriend having a random schedule. Yeah. It's been interesting because I don't know, sometimes you're just like, hey, what if we all took the day off? But that's great. How fun. Which is really fun. And it's really only happens at night when we're all like, let's go out on a Tuesday, it won't be crowded. Like, how old am I that's like what's our That's cool. I wish I had that kind of energy. Oh, it's rad. And then like, you know, we wake up a little bit late the next day. That's kind of frivolous. Anyways, yeah, it's been hard. It's been hard to also turn off that side of my brain that got me to where I am. And that is like very judgmental. And, you know, something I've been working really hard in therapy is like how I talk to myself. And I think that that's probably been the hardest part, maybe even harder than finding the balance, is when I am taking a day and I have the luxury to say, okay, I am going to rest right now, or I'm not going to do the like 15 things that I wanted to do during this hour that I could probably only get 2 things done. Not letting your brain kind of tell you that you're a failure, or not letting your brain kind of tell you that there's something, you know, oh my gosh, I'm going to catastrophize this and now I'm never going to get anything done ever, and I'm never going to get another job, and then I'm not going to be able to pay my rent, and, you know, and then just following
it goes on and on.
Horrible rabbit hole. So I'm not an expert, but I feel like I've gotten a good understanding of kind of like what I need on self-care days, and what's it called? Kind of containing the problem. Where, you know, maybe it's a compromise. Maybe I go for a really long walk and then I get like do something off my to-do list.
Yeah.
You know, working with yourself.
And tell us about your podcast.
Yes. So I've been working on this podcast that oh my gosh, it feels like I've been working on it forever. So it's kind of fun to like put it out. But honestly, when I say fun, I also mean absolutely fucking terrifying.
Hilarious.
Right?
Love it.
There's something so vulnerable about putting out like creative, just putting things out, because it's like a
people judge
thing.
And you're never gonna know. And nothing gives me more anxiety when you see the send button on Instagram with the account. I'm like, great, who's talking shit?
Right. But so yeah, my podcast it's just a podcast that's kind of rooted in curiosity. Whoa. So far, a lot of the conversations have been around like how do you create a life that you're excited to live? So it has been very like career and based, but also like hobby based, finding balance. But some of the later episodes, like we also just get into like answering questions. I'm a very curious person. So like bringing on experts to talk about like, I don't know, like what is short form media doing to our brain? Like, let's talk about that. Or even the first episode, which drops, tomorrow, and new episodes come out every Tuesday. So kind of like a little bonus.
We love a Tuesday podcast.
We love a Tuesday podcast. And it's one of my good friends who's a YouTuber, and then he also DJs. And so like we got to talking about kind of the logistics of being a show opener. And there's like a lot of random, I guess, like rules and etiquette.
I'm sure. Great.
So it's called Glad I Asked. I realized I didn't say it. It's called Glad I Asked. And it's basically me just asking people questions that I am happy to ask.
Good.
Yeah.
I love it. One final thought to wrap us out. If you were to talk to somebody who, you know, is in your college stage, what would you say to them to get started in their career?
To get started in your career, that's a... Because I think I'm going to give you 2.
Yes.
Because first I would say like, slow down. It's not a race. Because I am a very true believer that I think everything happens like on its own, on the timeline that it's supposed to happen. And if you're spending all this time in your head, like stressing about the fact that like you don't have this thing figured out, or you should be here now for like, because you set this arbitrary timeline, like you're just having a bad time. Like just enjoy it, work hard, and like it'll be fine, sort of a thing. I think something more actionable though would be, especially if you're in college, because I think something that college kids, it's so easy to get wrapped up on like the social part of college, and that like you have all of your friends around you, but in that same way, you have so many of like the smartest people in their field around you. Like that is just as accessible as your friends are. Like whether it's professors, whether it's like people guest lecturing, whether it's, you know, I don't know, a poetry slam or something, and to immerse yourself in that and really be there. I know that it can be really daunting to show up to one of these things alone, but sometimes that's better because then you're forced to talk to people. And if you listen to somebody give a lecture and you thought it was interesting, go talk to them afterwards and tell them, like, people want to help specifically college kids so bad. Like, use that card.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Sydnee, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Please tell everybody where they can find you on all of your social channels.
Yeah. So I'm Sid So Good across the board, which is, so my Sid, S-Y-D, I like forgot how to spell my name. S-Y-D, S-O-G-O-D. That's like on every platform. And then if you want to listen to my podcast, it's just Glad I Asked. On like every social media. Actually, every social media, I think it's Glad I Asked Pod. And then Instagram's just Glad I Asked. But then it'll be on like Apple Podcasts, Spotify. So.
And what about Twitch? And
Twitch is Sid So Good also.
Love it.
Everything's Sid So Good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to Sydnee for coming on the podcast, and thank you for listening. Guys, please, please, please drop us those Apple reviews. We are loving them. They really help to keep this podcast alive. Guys, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you, what is it? Oh my God, have we never heard this before? Next Tuesday.